Hey everyone, my name is Ross Miner. I'm a blind gamer and accessibility consultant, and welcome to my review of Forza Motorsport. A few things I want to jump into before the review. First being, I did not receive a review copy. Second being, I actually did playtest this game like half a year ago, but it was only for a couple hours. Just figured I would mention that in case it's important. And then lastly, this is an accessibility review. I'm not necessarily rating the game on its mechanics, just the accessibility. So keep that in mind for my final score at the end. But with that being said, let's jump into my blind accessibility review of Forza Motorsport. This game, Forza Motorsport, is the 8th installment of a motorsport title, but there are 13 Forza games in total because there are other Horizon games that are more of an arcade style racing game. So to be clear, this game is very much a simulation racing game, which will be important for later. The past two Forza games, Forza Motorsport 7 and Forza Horizon 5, have had varying levels of blind accessibility in them. Text-to-speech, driving assist, but they were both sort of incomplete. Text-to-speech in the sense that it didn't read everything, and driving assist in the sense that essentially in order for a blind person to be able to drive, they had to turn on all the assists. But once they turned on all the assists, a blind person could literally just hold down RT and press no other buttons and not steer at all, and the car would drive itself. So it wasn't really the experience that blind people were looking for, but Forza Motorsport is the experience blind people are looking for. And when I found out Forza was going to be accessible, I was absolutely floored, just because this is literally a historic moment. Exactly on the level of The Last of Us 2, because it's giving blind gamers access to an entire genre that they would not have been able to play otherwise. And growing up, before I went blind, I played a bunch of racing games. I played LA Rush on the PlayStation 2, I played MX Unleashed, not exactly a racing game, and of course I played Mario Kart, but just I love this genre and, you know, being able to play with people at parties or online or just with friends. And so yeah, I'm very, very, very excited about this game. The first thing I want to talk about is the text-to-speech in the game. Remember in my Diablo review when I said that it was the most advanced screen reader to date? Well, Forza absolutely blew it out of the park. The text-to-speech has so much customization, everything from speech rate, pitch, volume, even you can change the voices, and there are 9 voices to choose from. But taking it a step further, you can even customize what the text-to-speech reads. So for example, while you're racing, you can adjust whether it reads best times for each lap or whether it reads segment scores or things like that. And so it really helps with kind of adjusting how much clutter or text-to-speech you want to hear in a given moment. One last thing I almost forgot to mention about the text-to-speech, and this is huge, is that I don't believe this has been accomplished in any other video game, is that text-to-speech will read your driver's outfits. It will describe their outfits. And I just can't emphasize how big this is, because I believe in my Diablo review, I basically said that, you know, I wish character customization was accessible, because despite what some people may believe, blind people do care about things that they wear and care about colors and things like that. And I would love to be able to have that sort of agency to design a character that suits me. Well, now I can do that in Forza, and I want to show you guys a clip of me reacting to it, just to emphasize how big this is. Oh, dude. All right, guys, gotta get on a soapbox for a second. Like, this is literally about to bring tears to my fucking eyes. The fact that you can have at least some level of customization for your character and you know what that customization is incredible. But yeah, the text-to-speech just has so much customization, I couldn't possibly cover it all in this video. But if you're worried about anything not reading with TTS, 99% of everything in the game reads with text-to-speech, so I really wouldn't worry. On release of the game, there were a few things that TTS didn't read, but have since been patched. It has also been confirmed that accessibility will be updated throughout the life cycle of the game. But moving on to the number one question that probably everyone has is driving. How do blind people drive? And so we are going to break down the assists of the game. Similar to the text-to-speech, there's just so much detail in these driving assists that I'm sure there are going to be some things I missed, so keep that in mind. But for driving assist, there is steering, traction control, braking, stability, and even pit stop assistance for blind drivers. With all these features, it's not just a binary on and off. There are levels of steering assist, braking assist that you can have while driving. So if you're not very confident driving without assist, for example, you can turn them on and practice that way. And this is actually what I did. I mostly turned on all assists to the maximum, except I think I had braking on partial, and I just kind of learned that way and slowly began removing assists. Okay, so here we are at the top of the accessibility list. And firstly, I wanted to mention that it's kind of a double-edged sword because there's a ton of stuff in this list, which is awesome. You know, the more accessibility, the better. But it's also a very, very, very long list. And I really wish that there was a way I could, navigate between tabs with like the bumpers, for example. So I'm gonna scroll from the very top of the list all the way down to the bottom, just so you can see how long it takes.
Incoming quick chat visibility, 5 seconds. This determines how long quick chat messages from quick chat visibility. Incoming quick chat visibility, 5 seconds. This determines how long quick chat messages from other players are displayed.
That's how long it took. Okay, so here we are at the top of the accessibility sound cue list, and the first one on the list is steering guide. Now, what this does is basically pan the engine sound of your car from left to right based on where you are in relation to the optimal racing line. So basically the goal is to keep the sound of the car centered in your headphones or in the stereo field, essentially. Another cool thing about all these audio cues is that you can actually press in the left stick to get a description of the audio cue, and then you can press in the right stick to hear what the audio cue sounds like. And so I'm not going to go through and play every single description, but I'm going to play it for this one, just so you can hear what it sounds like.
The steering guide is one of the most important directional cues, designed to point you towards the suggested racing line, which is the fastest way around the track. It's important to note that the racing line will often take you to the very edge of the asphalt, and sometimes slightly beyond, as it points you to the quickest path through a turn. As you drive away from the line, you will hear the sound of your engine and tires pan left or right. Try to bring the car audio back to the center by making steering adjustments in the correct direction. By default, you should turn towards the sound of the car, as if you were following it around the track. However, if you would rather it feel like you are pulling the car back on track, you can easily flip the panning with the invert steering guide setting.
And now here is what the sound cue actually sounds like. That one's pretty self-explanatory because it's just car sound. Right here you can adjust the volume of your car engine as well as your tires. This is something I found very, very useful. You can also turn down the engine sounds for other cars. So again, it helped me out a lot and definitely something I would consider trying.
Player engine volume, 70. Tire volume, player engine volume, 70. Use right thumbstick horizontal inputs to navigate the following text by chapters. Adjust the volume of the player engine. Steering guide look ahead offset. Player engine volume, 70.
The next sound cue is turn navigation. And this one is actually really interesting because it was actually included in a DLC for Forza Horizon 5. And these turn announcements are actually used in racing for drivers. So I think that's kind of a cool universal design moment. But here is what it sounds like.
Left hairpin, left 4 into right 4.
So basically right there, it tells you the direction of the turn, and then it gives a number. That number signifies the severity of the turn, 1 being really sharp and 6 being pretty shallow. And something interesting is that these sound cues have actually been used in an audio game called Top Speed 3, which is actually a racing audio game. Obviously, it does not compare at all to Forza when it comes to the sound design and the physics and all of that, but just thought that was kind of cool that even however many years ago this audio game was doing that. Next up, we have turn cue announcements, and these sounds play when you are approaching a turn and when you are performing the turn. And for that second part, when you're performing the turn, is interesting because a sound plays when you're entering the turn, when you're kind of at the apex of the turn, and then the final sound, it plays higher pitch, letting you know that you have exited the turn sequence, which is just, again, so much detail in these sounds. I love it. But here is what it sounds like. And the cool thing about this sound cue and the ones coming up is that you can adjust the volume of them and the pitch. The other sound cues, you can adjust the volume, but the fact that you can adjust the pitch as well is so cool. Because a lot of the time, the sounds can sometimes blend in together, and I've seen a lot of people online adjusting the pitch of their sounds. Right here, we have AI takeover cues. This is a sound that plays basically whenever your car is pitting or whenever you press the button to put your car back on the track, which is a really useful feature. Here's what it sounds like. Nice and simple. And then there's a sound for when the AI is done. Next, we have an audio cue for deceleration, and basically it plays when you're going too fast and the game thinks you are going to crash. And this is what it sounds like. Next up, we have track limit cues, and I'm a huge fan of these sounds because they help so much. These sounds play in the left or right ear when you are approaching the edge or the side of the track. So if you're on the left side, it'll play in the left ear. If you're on the right side, it'll play in the right ear. This is what it sounds like. Next up, we have gear indicator cues, and this one is interesting because it's for people who are driving manually, which I do not at this moment. But interestingly, when you press in the right stick, no audio cue plays, even when I turn it on, so I'm not quite sure what it actually sounds like. Next, we have cues for when you need to shift up or shift down, and again, this is all in manual. So that this is what shift up sounds like, and this is what shift down sounds like. Last but not least, we have wrong way cues, which lets you know if you're just going the wrong direction on the track, which is awesome. And then a sound cue will play when you start going the correct direction. This is what it sounds like. There you go. Now, with all of these audio accessibility cues, something so cool is that you are able to adjust what is called the look ahead offset. So what this means is it's basically the reaction time you have to respond to these audio cues. Right now, the default is 50. If you increase it, then the game will play these sound cues earlier, therefore giving you more time to react to the sound cues. Similarly, if you bring the values below 50, the sound cues will play sooner. So like, let's say you're approaching a turn, it may play those sound cues when you're right at the turn instead of like kind of when you're approaching it. And it does say that if you lower these values below 50, it could potentially increase in faster times, which I find really interesting. It's not something I've actually experimented with yet. I've kept it on 50, but that's really interesting to me, and I'm excited to mess with that. Now, on the topic of sound, and this is kind of a big one, but there are also audio descriptions in the game, and you can turn them on or off, and you can also adjust the volume of them, which is really cool. However, there is one thing to be transparent about, in that these audio descriptions are done by AI. Or they're not created by AI, but the voice used is AI. So it's not a real person describing, and you could definitely tell. It's not horrible. It's not a horrible experience, but you could definitely tell it's not a real person, but it's still very, very helpful. One way it helps a ton is that it describes the weather conditions before you race on a track, which is huge because, if it's rainy, you're going to have so much less traction. I don't race. I don't know the correct terms, but I think that's the correct term. Something I would have loved to see the audio description have is actually describe the track, because something I didn't realize until I began playing for well over a week is that the elevation of these tracks can also change. And so it makes me think about times where I may be speeding down a hill and I don't know. So having some sort of description like, hey, this is a hilly track or whatever would go a long way, I feel. Lastly, before we exit the accessibility menu, I wanted to point out that there are options for color blindness, multiple options as well for different diagnoses of color blindness, as well as color contrast options. So love to see it, pun intended. Something I wanted to point out about the steering guide that a lot of people, including myself, have been struggling with is the fact that it is following the optimal racing line. And so what that means is, well, it's kind of self-explanatory. There's a line on the track, and both sighted players and now blind players can detect it or perceive it. And what this does is gives you the most optimal route to completing a lap and a race. This includes driving you to the very edge of the track, even around corners, for example. And so this has confused a lot of blind people because they're like, well, why am I not in the middle of the track? It's supposed to keep me in the middle of the track, the steering guide. But that's just not how racing works. And it's interesting because I partially agree with some people. I think it would be awesome if there was a way to toggle it to just keep you in the center of the track. I think that would help a lot of people, A, get a feel for the shape and the layout of the track, but also B, to learn how to steer a car. Those are my thoughts on it. I do think that the default should be the optimal racing line, but for people who are starting out, I think something else would be really appreciated. Okay, so those are all the audio cues that allow blind people to drive in this game. So what are my thoughts on the driving in this game? Well, as many other people are saying online, the learning curve is huge. More than The Last of Us 2, more than Mortal Kombat 1 even. But there are a couple of reasons I theorize this is. First being that, with any accessibility feature, there's going to be a learning curve. And so I think that's half of it. There's a ton of different sound cues. Like, there's no getting around it. That's just going to be a bit to learn at first. However, what a lot of people I don't think realize, at least I didn't realize when I played this game, and when I say a lot of people, I mean blind people, is that this is a racing simulator game, or simulation, or whatever you want to call it. It's not an arcade style racing game. The controls, the steering, the physics are realistic. And so that being said, like steering, for example, I originally thought that like to steer, you just press left on the stick. But in reality, you have to gently nudge it just to like turn a little bit. And like pressing is when you want to sharply turn. And so yeah, that was something I realized. But all that being said, I started on heavy assists for mostly everything. And now hi Daisy, sorry about that. But now I'm on partial assists for everything. And the amazing thing about this is that I've seen blind drivers who have much less assist than I do. And so the fact that they're able to get that good and get down to that level is just awesome. And it wouldn't have been done if it weren't for these accessibility features. So just so happy to see that. So yeah, I'm going to show an example of my driving when I first began playing the game on Twitch and where my driving is at now, just to highlight how much better I've gotten already. So here is the video of me driving on Twitch. I'm not paying attention. Okay. As you can see, I'm literally all over the place. But here is a video of me driving now.
Score 1.0. Personal best for segment elevator bend. Personal best segment plus 20.
So as you can see, my driving has already improved significantly. And one other feature that has really helped me with this, and it's not even, I mean, you could call it an accessibility feature, but it's not, is rewinding when you crash. So you can press a button and pretty much rewind your car as much as you want to either practice a turn that you keep spinning out on, or just, do a specific segment a little better. Something I love is that when you rewind your car, the accessibility sound cues also play in reverse. So you can essentially hear where your car has been and to know when to stop rewinding.
Rewinding. Rewind done.
It's so cool. Like just talking about it is so cool to have a game like this, to be able to feel what it's like going fast in a car, right? I've driven four-wheelers and snowmobiles, but cars, it's just, I don't want to put my trust in a sighted person to do that. And so to give me and other blind people the feeling of what it's like to race, to handle and use a car is just, it's amazing. It is so great. But for anyone unaware, Forza being a racing simulator, you can also buy a racing sim hookup or setup to play the game with. So a wheel or even a seat and pedals, all those different things. Again, not a car enthusiast, so couldn't go into the details, but I always thought that was so cool because I was thinking, you know, when I learned about the game, a blind person could hook up a racing sim and really feel what it's like to drive a car without having to rely on a sighted person or without destroying half a city or whatever. But here we are at the end of the video. That wraps up my, what I'm guessing is going to be a very long accessibility review, but for good reason, right? There's so much in this game, and yeah, you know, I didn't really cover The Last of Us 2 when it came out, and so I wanted to make a point to cover this because, again, it is really historic. You know, I do apologize for it being late, but October was crazy busy for me, but also I didn't receive a review copy, so I was like, well, you know, I got no rush. I really want to just dive into this game and really learn everything there is to learn before I begin talking about it, because sometimes with accessibility reviews, I find things later after I've sunk, you know, several hours into the game. So yeah, I feel like this is going to be a pretty faithful review of the game. But yeah, I really hope you all have enjoyed this review. If you have, let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, like, subscribe, blah blah, share, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But yeah, huge shout out to Turn 10 for making this game accessible, and this is a game I'm going to be sinking hundreds, I can confidently say hundreds of hours into. So if anyone wants to race with me, hit me up in the comments or wherever. My gamer tag on Xbox is Ross Miner. And until my next video, I will see you all later.